Well, I'm Cuban.
Soy cubano,
Don't let anyone be
resulta
scared by a
que
Cuban
haber
making
cubanos haciendo
electronic
música
music.
electrónica en Cuba.
Cuba has all the
Hay
bloodlines
toda la
of the
sangre del
world.
mundo.
The
Por ahí
French,
pasaban los
Africans,
franceses, los
Spaniards,
africanos, los
English,
españoles, los
Americans.
ingleses, los
I mean,
americanos. O sea, y
and
nada,
that's
pues
it.
bueno,
My
me
father was a
caracterizo, con lo
violinist,
cual me
so he enrolled
matriculó a
me
la
in
escuela
music
de
school,
música.
also for
También
violin.
también a la de 7 años.
At the age of 7,
Y más
we had to
tarde
get up at 5 in the morning, have breakfast with tea, and maybe bread with oil and salt. That was starting in my second year at the conservatory when they suspended the scholarship due to lack of resources. So you had to go home and back every day. It was far away. It wasn't the typical school that's 3 blocks away. No, I think it was about a 40-minute drive. My sister and I had to walk a kilometer to a pickup point where the conservatory bus arrived. The typical school subjects were in the morning and the music subjects in the afternoon, or vice versa. In my first year of elementary school, when the scholarship still existed, it's been a long time since I remembered that time. But I don't think it was the worst, one of the worst times of my life. Showering with cold water, I'm the most cold-averse person there is. There were pallets in the showers to stand on, but of course, wet wood. A hostel full of double bunk beds. I'm so reserved with my privacy and my things. As a kid, I was very introverted, but in those conditions, it was impossible to be introverted. I was on a forced roll all the time. Even before that, I belonged to musical combos in the first years of school, performing locally and touring a bit around the country. From there, artist begins to develop because you understand the language. How to behave? At that time, I played all kinds of minor percussion instruments. There was the option to also play the guitar, but I don't know what happens with the guitar. It doesn't appeal to me much. My poor niece is a guitarist, but no, it suits you. Then at the conservatory, I became a very good violinist. Yes, I've always liked to be one of the best. I don't know if it's a defect or whatever. Well, being so young, I don't think it was me who wanted to be the best. I just suppose there was a talent there. In fact, in the neighborhood games, I was the worst at everything. Marbles, baseball, spinning tops, everything. And I kept playing the same without worrying about anything, so it's not like I always wanted to be the best. Besides, having my father as a violinist at home meant studying all the time. My friends from the neighborhood would come looking for me and I wouldn't even see them. My mother would come out and say, "He's studying." Girl, we were very young back then. Well, the violin is more symphonic and I was always more into dancing and partying. I think when I was 10 or 11, I would already go out alone to watch orchestras and get home at 4:05 in the morning. Yes, when I was 10 or 11, how did my parents allow me to do that? I don't know either. I also had my first music group at that age, more or less. We were so young that 2 of us had to carry a conga, one in front and one in back. It was all super fun. We rehearsed at my house. I played the violin, chose the repertoire, typical songs from Cuban music of that era. Thinking about it, I don't know how I came up with the idea of carrying out this project, being so young. We played for free, obviously, but people gave us snacks. That festive side of mine surely comes from my blood, since my father used to be a 𝓓𝓮𝓭𝓲𝓷, a musical format typical of dance music from the areas furthest from the epicenter of the country. It features violins and flutes, accompanying all the other dance instruments, such as piano, bass, and percussion. And I was there too. Well, not this photo. This one was almost born. But my father would take us to the family when I was the youngest, about 4 or 5 years old. Well, later on I started to become more interested in other instruments than the violin. I liked the violin quite a bit, but it couldn't be included in the music I liked back then, which was Cuban dance music, not brass band music, which was an Eastern style, but rather the style of music from the capital. The violinist's pose wasn't very conducive either, which is elegance, control, and integrity. Not me, I'm more uncontrolled. Well, you can see in my music that it feels like the world is about to end in some of my songs. In others, I've had to force myself to slow down a bit. Otherwise, nobody would endure a whole album. So I'm looking for an alternative outlet. The piano was a core subject at the conservatory, but it was classical piano, and I didn't pay much attention to it, which led me to get terrible grades on exams. I suppose that made me think I wasn't good at it and put me off it. But it's actually one of the instruments I like the most. Well, me and everyone else, I suppose. I went looking for the trumpet, learning all the positions with my classmates. It's a saxophone in the major scale, which is when you go. That's a scale all at the level of classmates. I stopped studying the violin to go around inventing in other areas, disobeying the rules of the conservatory, percussion, my favorite, drums, palas. But of course, I had a cousin who was a famous bassist, who played with one of the top singers, 𝓓𝓮𝓭𝓲𝓷. My best friend who came with me since kindergarten was also a bassist, 𝓓𝓮𝓮𝓻𝓬𝓸𝓷, who's been with me since the days of holes in my shoes and no socks. Well, much earlier, obviously. By the way, he was the one who gave me my first bass guitar lesson. Well, no, double bass back then. The bass is also related to the violin. In fact, they have the same strings, but in reverse. I think that's what convinced me. Said, hey, this switch is easy. And not to mention that it's one of the most important instruments in timba. It's the style of music I mentioned before that's used in the capital. A series of circumstances came together that made me have to say, man, this is the instrument. Look no further. It's happened that when I was 14, in my first year of high school, I was suspended from school for a year for cheating on a history exam. I remember my father went to talk to the principal and ended up causing a scene, throwing his bag on the floor. People were running through the halls, some gossiping, others panicking and horrified. And in that year of separation, I permanently switched to bass. I went to the capital and never returned in search of a future. I bought a 4-string bass for $10, painted it a metallic blue that I had at home, carried it on my back without a case, which people told me looked like a crossbow. At 15, I arrived in the capital, just like that. In Havana, I lived with my sister, who'd been living there for a while, also working as a musician. I quickly started looking for work. I walked the streets with my bass on my back, and wherever I heard they were rehearsing, I would go there to see if they needed a bassist, or if not, to make connections. It was super difficult for me because it was so embarrassing back then. But having a goal gives you strength and courage, and that's exactly what happened. Obviously, I don't remember very well, but I think the first orchestra I heard rehearsing needed a bassist. Obviously, it was an 8th tier orchestra, but for me, at that moment, it was like signing Lady Gaga. They tested me a bit there, which was difficult because I was just learning to play bass. With my friends at the conservatory, I'd learned some double bass, but this was the first time I had a bass guitar. Luckily, in Cuba, technique is valued only a 5th way back then, especially for an orchestra of practically amateurs. Cubans, accustomed to not being able to do anything their whole life, have fun with what they have, and laugh at others all the time. At home, they called that orchestra los insistentes, because they only rehearsed and never worked. What I needed at that moment was to learn, and for me, it was one of the best experiences of my life. So I went through several groups for about a year, traveling a lot, going through dangerous neighborhoods. I had to search. Was a minor and didn't have a very developed conscience. Because if I had to spend 2 years depending on my sister now, I'd have an anxiety attack. I also remember that since I didn't have a case, if I had to take a bus, I'd start studying while the bus arrived. Looking back now, it's one of the funniest things about that time. I studied on the stairs, in doorways, anywhere. Until finally, my brother-in-law's orchestra, which I used to attend every rehearsal, was left without a bassist. It was already an established professional orchestra with arrangements by the best arrangers. And I don't know how. Maybe there weren't any other bassists in all of Havana, or they didn't even want to look for them. They told me to take the position. I was completely amazed. They had a baby bass, something I hadn't played other than the 3 silly songs my friends in elementary school taught me. And they also had a 5-string bass guitar. I didn't have to have nerves of steel either, yes, but it was the best opportunity I had to grow, learn, and see what those scores were like. One I'd never seen before on a professional guitar. So I said yes, and that's how my professional life began.